One more time, Broncos country, let's ride.
Broncos country, let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride.
Well, it was a ride for Broncos country, but not the one that fans were expecting, as the Broncos finished last place in their division for the third straight season. Yes, you heard that correctly. Last place in the division 3 seasons in a row. I had to go double check that myself. What went wrong this season for Broncos country? After all, it looked like it was going to be a promising season after they traded for superstar quarterback Russell Wilson with a trade with the Seattle Seahawks, where they gave up Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick. Now, that might seem like a lot, plus extending him and guaranteeing him almost, $250 million. But hey, now you've got your quarterback. Now you're ready to compete. So what went wrong? I think one of the things we have to look at is the offensive side of the ball, as the Denver Broncos finished in the bottom half of the league in total offense and only averaged 16.9 points per game. That's not going to get it done for you. Not in today's NFL. You can't even score 3 touchdowns in a game on average. No. Not especially when you're going up against the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Chargers in your own division. No way. But we also have to remember they hired a new head coach, a first-time head coach in Nathaniel Hackett, and many people believe he is the reason why the Broncos had such a terrible season. After all, let's not forget what happened at the beginning of the NFL season last year.
I think we should call a timeout, like now.
They're running a play. They look unsettled. Sutton doesn't know what he's doing.
Yes, at the beginning of last season, they had a lot of clock management issues, which you would expect from a rookie head coach, but so much so that he would change his game plans week to week based off of the pressure from the media. Not a good look for a coach. Nathaniel Hackett was so bad at managing the clock, the Broncos had to hire someone to help him out with clock management. After the week 1 blunder in Monday Night Football against the Seahawks, the team has hired someone to help with clock management, but it didn't get any better. Now, I know some of you would say, hey, clock management issues, it happens in the league. Even some of the best coaches in the league aren't great at managing the clock. That's true. But maybe those games shouldn't have been that close to begin with. If you're putting up more points, then you don't have to worry about clock management at the end of the game. This is true, especially if you're not playing from behind. So let's take a look at what happened during their season last year. So as we can see, not a great season for them. 5-12, got off to a decent start, lost that that week 1 opener against the Seahawks, and went on to win against Houston, San Francisco. But if you notice, they're still not scoring enough points here. We got 17, 16, 11, 23, 12, 19, 16, 21. I mean, these scores are not going to get you many wins in today's NFL. And then look at this big, long losing streak here. They did start getting things together, putting up, 28 in a loss against Kansas City. They came firing back after being down 28 in that game. Then this is where Nathaniel Hackett officially got fired after they gave up 51. This is where the team was just done. The defense was done. They gave up 51 to the Rams. Remember, the Baker Mayfield-led Rams. So this was a recap of Denver's season. But the past is the past. We're on to a new season. Forget what happened in 2022. We're on to 2023. So let's take a look and see what have the Broncos done this year through the draft, through free agency, through other trades that they might have done. And then let's preview what their schedule looks like and maybe some best bets at the end of this video. I think one of the biggest moves that they made this offseason that everyone's going to be talking about is the hiring of Sean Payton, which to me is a great hire. Great coach, can come in, turn things around. I think this is a beautiful hire. But what they gave up for him, remember, they gave up all those draft picks for Russell Wilson, which this year's draft, they ended up, giving a first-round pick to Seattle, which ended up being the 5th overall pick. Denver could have used that pick this year. Let's be honest. And then they give up another first-round pick. Denver had 2 first-round picks, the 30th overall pick, I believe it was. And they gave that in this trade. They gave that to the New Orleans Saints for Sean Payton plus a second-round pick. Now, that is a steep price, in my opinion, a first and a second-round pick, all for a head coach. And yes, you do get a third-rounder coming back your way next year, but still a lot. So hopefully he's worth it. And I do believe Sean Payton will be worth it. We're going to find out, though, this first season. So when the Broncos do finally get a pick in the draft, it isn't until the second round with the 63rd overall pick, and they take a wide receiver out of Oklahoma, Marvin Mims Jr., a great, speedy, shifty guy. He's going to be able to play the slot real well, be very creative out there for Russell Wilson. I think he's going to fit beautifully into this offense, and I think he's ready for today's NFL. Don't believe me on this. Let's take a look at some of his highlights.
Gabriel. Oh my goodness. That ball was Dunlap is he does a good job of collisioning him, and that's legal at the college level. Oh,
number 24, defense.
Wow.
What a catch indeed. It looks like they got themselves a very skilled ball handler out there. I think he's going to fit just perfectly into this Broncos offense. Next up, they have 2 third-round picks. First up of the 67th overall pick, they take Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Arkansas.
What'll Bobby Petrino dial up on a 3rd and 1? Right, drilled. What number?
What was that? Was a decleaner.
And then after that, they took Riley Moss, cornerback out of Iowa. This guy is a ball hawk.
Turnover margin last year. And there's another pick by Riley Moss. Are you kidding me? 2 pick sixes.
You do not have the opportunity to work with a guy in a game situation, not in front of a crowd.
So with what they had to work with, I like how they drafted. They got themselves a wide receiver, and then they addressed some issues on the defensive side of the ball with a nice linebacker and a cornerback. Now, they do have a few more picks after that, but anything after the 3rd round, it's all a gamble and a guess. We'll see how it turns out. But for, having 3 picks in the top 3, in the second, 1 in the second, 2 in the 3rd round, I think they did all right. I think they addressed some needs. So now let's take a look at free agency. What did the Broncos do during free agency? What are some of the bigger signings that they had? Now, I know it's not sexy, but I think they did the right thing here. They need to protect their aging $250 million quarterback in Russell Wilson. And what better way than go out and spend money on the offensive line? They went and signed a guard out of Baltimore, Ben Powers, agreed to a 4-year, $52 million deal. He led Baltimore with 196 snaps, becoming the only Ravens player to participate in every offensive play. I like that. I like a guy that we know he's going to be out there. He's going to be available. That's what they need, and he's experienced. So he's going to be out there protecting Russell Wilson. I think that was a great signing. I also like this here. Look at this. He started on both left and right guard with the Ravens, potentially giving the Broncos some additional power in the middle of the formation. I like that. Next up, they signed an offensive tackle, Mike McGlinchey here, who will be joining the Broncos after signing a 5-year, $87.5 million deal after missing 12 games in 2021 with a torn quadricep. Ooh. McGlinchey started every game for the 49ers last season. And I don't know if you remember this, but the Niners were pretty damn good last season. So Russell Wilson's got a big boy out there who's experienced and is going to protect him. All right, that's what they need. Listen, I know no one gets excited about signing the big uglies, but those big uglies are what's going to make or break your team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, especially when you got an aging quarterback like Russell Wilson. So they're going to protect him. They're going to do their job. Granted, they stay healthy. Now you let Russ cook. Let him cook. Let him use his weapons as he's going to actually have time to make some plays and make his. Now, I know a lot of you might say, well, this isn't really that big of a deal. They signed Jarrett Stidham, but I would argue this is a big deal. If anything happens, Russell Wilson, you need an experienced quarterback to get in there and get the job done, just to be able to, right the ship and keep things above water. All right. And Jarrett Stidham is a veteran NFL quarterback. He has the experience. That's someone that you want sitting on your bench. If for some reason, and we're not wishing anything bad on anyone, but for some reason, if Russell Wilson goes down, especially if you're having a really good season, you need someone that can step in and keep that offense going. And I think Jarrett Stidham was a smart signing there for what's available as backup quarterbacks in the league. And of course, one of the biggest signings this offseason that they made was Frank Clark coming over from Kansas City. The 2-time Super Bowl champ signed a 1-year, $7 million contract, which now gives that Denver offensive line an elite pass rusher, which it needs after trading Bradley Chubb last year. All in all, I think the Broncos had a good offseason with what they're, they had to work with. They got an elite head coach in Sean Payton. They beefed up the offensive line for their, star quarterback. They drafted positions of need. They got another wide receiver in there. They got the defense is the biggest question of this Broncos team. And they went and signed Frank Clark, and then they drafted a linebacker and a cornerback with a few of their top picks. I think they did about all they could this offseason, and I think it's going to pay off. So let's take a look at their schedule and see where they might end up this season. They open up against Las Vegas at home. So, I mean, it's already a pretty favorable schedule. They get to open up home 2 games in a row. They get Las Vegas and Washington. And I would argue those are 2 very winnable games for the Broncos, especially early in the season at elevation. They're going to have the advantage against other opponents. Then, tough game, got to go down to Miami. But then you get to go to Chicago. So, I mean, if you can get 3-1 through that, that first month of the season, I think the Broncos would take that. Now they have the New York Jets coming into town. That's going to be a fun game. Could go either way. And then, of course, they got to go to Kansas City. You got to assume that they're going to probably lose both those games, and you're looking at 3-3 start. But then we go right into, Green Bay, very winnable game there. And then Kansas City, division game, you get Kansas City at home. You might be able to play them tough and steal one of these 2 games from Kansas City, but you never know. And then they got to go to Buffalo. So not a great start, but they do get a favorable bye week in week 9. So you do get a bye week before you have to play Monday Night Football against Buffalo, which listen here, hint, before we get into our Buffalo breakdown later on this offseason, I think Buffalo is in for a long season. So could be a winnable game there, but then their schedule gets very favorable after that, as they're home against Minnesota, home against Cleveland, at Houston. And I think the biggest thing, as we'll get into bets, some of the bets that I like on the Broncos this offseason, I think the best part about their schedule is the fact that they get the Chargers and the Chiefs, the Chargers, they get both games of the Chargers in December. So late in the season. Why do I think that's important? Because I think if you go and look at the Chargers, I think the Chargers are going to have an awful season. I think it's going to be a terrible season for the Chargers. And if you're Denver, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get into the playoffs. You're not going to win the division. Let's be honest. Chiefs are winning that division. You're not doing it. So the best you can get in that division is second. If you get second, you got yourself a chance to make the playoffs as a wild card. I think by having the Chargers, who's going to be your competition for that second, to finish second in the division, getting them later in the season, the Broncos, who might finally be picking up some momentum going into December, I think the Chargers, conversely, will be losing steam, and players will start giving up when they see that the season is lost, because I think the Chargers are going to have a down season. More on that later. So they go to Los Angeles. They got the Chargers there. Then they got to go to Detroit. Then they're home against New England, which is never easy. But that's Christmas Eve game. It can be interesting. The New Year's Eve game against the Chargers, and then they finish the season against the Raiders. I mean, the fact that you get to finish your season, the last 4 games of your season, you get Detroit, you get the Chargers at home, a divisional opponent at home, and then you get to finish on the Raiders there. Very winnable games for them. Coin flip game with New England, my New England Patriots. Yes, I know it's still going to be a coin flip game, especially if that team's humming and playing how they can play, and it's going to be up in altitude. So, I mean, they could win all 4 of those games and find themselves in the playoffs very easily. So if I'm a Broncos fan, I'm probably pretty excited. You have a favorable schedule. You're going to start off with a couple wins, probably. It's going to get a little bumpy. You might have a couple shockers there. You might knock off Kansas City in one of those games, all right? Get a little momentum. But, hey, come November, you're going to be humming, and you're going to hit December, and then once you see that the playoffs are within reach and teams just figure out who they are, it's not crazy to think that Denver Broncos could be in the playoffs. Take a look over at DraftKings. The season win total for the Denver Broncos is set at 8.5, which sounds about right. Now, based off of what we've talked about, I would be bullish on the over. You can also, look at this, you can also adjust. I kind of like how they have this. If you think they're going to have a really good season, I do not advise this, but if you think they're going to get 11 wins, you can get the plus 310 on that. Now, their odds to win the division, like I was saying, they are the 3rd favorite to win the division. Chiefs, big favorite to win their division. Broncos, though, plus 550. Chargers are ahead of them. But like I'm saying, I think Broncos are a buy-on team, not for the division, but for finishing ahead of the Chargers. So what's a way that we can bet this? One way we can do this is bet them to make the playoffs at plus 190 here. Obviously, if we're bullish on them to finish ahead of the Chargers, gives them a good chance if they do that to actually make the playoffs. So you can get plus 190 on the Broncos to make the playoffs. But I think there's a better bet to be made, and we have to go over to our good friends over at Bet Online to find this. You can bet the exact position of the division that a team is going to finish in, and look what they have. They have the Broncos to finish second in their division plus 270. I like this. I think this is the better bet than them to make the playoffs. Why? Because they could still finish second in their division and miss the playoffs. But if they do finish second in their division, you still win, and you're getting plus 270 on it versus plus 190. So you take out the risk of whether they make the playoffs or not. Because let's be honest, if they finish third in their division, they're not going to be playoff contenders. It's highly, highly unlikely. So let's take the better odds and have them finish second in the division at plus 270. That's my favorite futures bet for the Broncos team. If you are very bullish on the Broncos and you think they're headed to the Super Bowl this season, well, you can get them at 25-1 over on DraftKings. And if you're a really big believer, you can take Denver Broncos plus 4,000 or 40-1 return on your money that they are going to win the Super Bowl this season. Now, like I said, I'm not that bullish on the Broncos, but I do think they're going to have a turnaround season, and I think they do finish second in their division. Now, the only thing with that bet that I gave out at plus 270 is what happens if they do end up winning the division? Well, in that case, maybe you bet them to win the division and to finish second in the division. You get plus 550 and plus 270 on those. You can't go wrong either way. But overall, Denver, I think you have to be excited about your season. You got a new head coach coming in. You beefed up that offensive line. You added an offensive weapon, and you got a slew of running backs. You can be a running team, a passing team. You can do what you need to do there. I think the biggest question with the Broncos is going to be that defense. We'll find out. That defense is going to determine whether they stay in these games or not. You signed Frank Clark. You drafted some young players. Hopefully you guys stay healthy. And listen, Broncos country, let's ride.